Ever notice your anger soften without forcing forgiveness? Well, in a world that urges us to forgive and forget, this can feel wrong. But here's the twist. When anger fades naturally, it's not compliance, it's integration. It means you've allowed your rage to complete its cycle. I once believed I had to force forgiveness to heal, but it turns out my body had its own timeline, and trusting it changed everything. There were people I couldn't even think about without trembling, and I'd fantasize about what I'd say if they cornered me. I'd write letters I knew I'd never send. The anger was all-consuming, and at that time, it was necessary. It brought me back into my body after years of chronic dissociation and spiritual bypassing. But eventually, something shifted. I noticed that I wasn't looping anymore. I didn't care about being misunderstood. I didn't need to win anymore. Most telling of all, I didn't care. Not because I forgave, not because I made peace with the harm, but because I was no longer operating from defense. And this is the natural arc of true integration. So let's strip the shame off anger for a second. Because if you've survived covert control, gaslighting, or spiritual manipulation, anger is not dysfunction. It's intelligence. When the fog begins to lift and you realize how long you've been silenced, minimized, or reshaped to meet someone else's needs, anger is the spark that restores your sovereignty. It's the moment your system says, enough. It breaks the trance of self-blame. It interrupts the enmeshment pattern and reclaims the inner authority that was buried under guilt. And for many highly sensitive people, especially those conditioned to perform or appease or spiritualize every wound, anger is the first honest emotion that feels truly yours. It's primal, it's electric, and for the first time, it can become a bridge. A bridge between your false self and your real one. So if you've been through that phase and now you're feeling less angry, don't panic. You haven't gone soft, you're not regressing. You're evolving. Because once the boundary is embodied, the signal doesn't need to stay loud. Let's make a really important distinction. There's a difference between suppression and completion. Suppression is when you shove the anger down because you're afraid of being seen as unspiritual, dramatic, or bitter. It's guilt motivated, and it leaves a residue. But completion is when the anger dissolves because the message has been received by you. It's no longer needed to defend your boundary because the boundary is now internal. It's in your bones. And this is where a lot of sensitive awakening people get stuck because we've been trained to associate peace with forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't a goal. It's not the gold star at the end of healing. Sometimes it comes in the way that we expect. Sometimes it doesn't. That's okay. True spiritual integration means learning to rest in peace, even if there's no apology. Not resting in peace in that way, just resting in that presence, in silence. Even if there's no reconciliation, apology, or dramatic emotional closure, you don't need a perfect ending to be free. You just need to stop handing your life force to the past. So what do you do when your anger starts to fade, but you're not ready to call it forgiveness? Well, first, just let it stay incomplete. You don't need a bow-wrapped resolution. Freedom doesn't always arrive with a ceremony. Sometimes it's just a slow, clean release. Second, try to track your energy. So notice what happens when their name comes up. Notice when you stop spinning stories. That's not apathy, it's just liberation. Third, try to replace fire with rhythm. So when the intensity drops, your system might feel disoriented. So try to let something softer take its place, like music, movement, breath, or prayer. Or just try to find structure and stillness. Fourth, set boundaries without needing to feel angry first. This is a massive shift. You don't need the fire to say no. You don't need to be triggered to take space. You can just start setting limits from clarity instead of from adrenaline. And fifth, try to allow the grief. Just because anger has faded doesn't mean that the pain has. So it's okay to let the sadness come in and let confusion stay a while. But don't turn that into a project. Just let stillness hold it without needing a story. It's a delicate transition. So it requires clarity and care, not reactivity or bypass. So here's what's really happening beneath the surface. You're no longer outsourcing your healing to an apology that may never come. Your system has reclaimed its own closure. This is not spiritual bypass. This is spiritual weight. You've remembered who you are, and that remembrance carries more weight than any confession, reconciliation, or emotional performance ever could. This is the kind of peace that doesn't need to be proven. It just is. And if forgiveness rises from that, it comes gently as grace, not as pressure, not as obligation, not as the price of your healing. You don't forgive to become holy. You become whole, and from there you might forgive. But either way, you're not frozen anymore. You're not waiting. You're living. If you're in this phase, if your anger is quieting and you don't quite know what to do with the space it leaves behind, I want you to know that this is not regression. This is repatterning. Inside the sovereignty sequence, I guide you through every phase of the return. Not just the rupture, not just the grief, but the calm, the integration, the subtle rebuild that follows the storm. If you'd like a guided practice to help you reconnect with your own clarity, just comment, send the meditation, and I'll share the voice beneath the noise, which is a short audio to help you hear what's real beneath the pressure to move on. You don't have to forgive to be free. You don't need to stay angry to stay clear. When the fight dissolves, just let stillness lead. You're not soft for letting go. You're not broken for feeling less. You're just in a new phase of sovereignty. one where your truth speaks without shouting. So let the fire fade if it wants to, and let peace rise, not as a performance, but as your new home. And as always, may the shadow wane and the stardust remain.